In the heart of New York City, where dreams rise taller than the skyline and hearts often get lost in the rush, two souls were never meant to meet. This is the story of Isabella Carter and Liam Reed. Isabella was a woman born into unimaginable luxury, the daughter of a billionaire real estate mogul. Her world was one of glass towers, exclusive galas and designer suits. Liam, on the other hand, was a quiet street artist. His life was spent painting the very walls that people like Isabella's father owned. He lived in a world of paint-stained hands, restless dreams, and the raw, unfiltered beauty of the city streets. They came from worlds so different they might as well have been on separate planets. But destiny, as we know, doesn't care much for last names, bank accounts, or social class. It has its own script, its own timing. It all began on a rainy afternoon, the kind of day where the city seems to sigh. Isabella's chauffeured car broke down near the Brooklyn Bridge. Frustrated, she stepped out, clutching her umbrella against the wind, her expensive heels clicking impatiently on the wet pavement. And that's when she saw him. He was standing under a half-broken awning, completely absorbed, painting the city skyline onto a cracked, forgotten wall. There was something about the way he looked at the world, the way his brush moved, as if he saw vibrant life where everyone else only saw decay. It stopped her dead in her tracks. The frustration, the broken-down car, it all just melted away. She found herself walking closer, drawn by an invisible thread. "You paint the city like it's alive," she said, her voice softer than she intended. Liam didn't even look up from his work. "That's because it is," he replied, his voice calm and steady. "You just have to stop rushing long enough to feel it breathe." That one sentence, so simple, so rude, echoed in her mind long after the tow truck arrived and she was whisked away back to a gilded cage. Days turned into a week, but she couldn't shake the image of the painter with the quiet, knowing eyes. She couldn't forget his words. So, she went back. At first she told herself it was just a check on the progress of the mural, a detached artistic curiosity. But soon, that excuse wore thin. She came back to talk. And then, she came back just to be near him. They spent hours together, their two worlds colliding in the most beautiful way. They sat by the river, watching the ferries glide by, sharing stories from lives that couldn't have been more different. He told her about growing up with nothing but a sketchbook and a relentless sense of hope, finding color in the grayest corners of the city. She told him about growing up with everything imaginable, except the one thing she craved most, freedom. The freedom to be herself. With Liam, Isabella laughed without trying. It was a real, uninhibited laugh she hadn't heard from herself in years. And with Isabella, Liam started to believe in possibilities he'd long ago dismissed as impossible dreams. For the very first time in their lives, they both felt truly seen. Not for their names, not for their status, but for who they were at their core. But love, especially a love that dares to cross such rigid boundaries, often becomes a storm. And that storm was about to break. When her father, the powerful real estate mogul, found out about their relationship, everything changed. The warmth they had found turned into a chilling reality. He summoned Isabella to his penthouse office. The city skyline spread out behind him like a conquered kingdom. "He's using you, Isabella," her father said, his voice cold and sharp as steel. "He wants your name, your money. That's what people like him do. They see a shortcut, and they take it." But Isabella knew better. She had looked into Liam's eyes. She had seen his soul honest, unguarded, and full of a love that was pure and real. It had nothing to do with money. It had everything to do with her. Her pleas fell on deaf ears. Her father, a man accustomed to getting his way, decided to make his power known. It was swift and brutal. Within a week, Liam's art permits were mysteriously revoked. His beautiful murals, the ones that brought life to forgotten neighborhoods, were painted over, erased as if they never existed. And finally, his small studio was shut down. The locks changed. Isabella was horrified. She confronted her father. She begged him, pleaded with him to stop, but he wouldn't listen. He saw it as protecting his daughter, his legacy. That night, a storm raged outside, mirroring the tempest in her heart. She drove to Liam's small apartment. Rain poured down in sheets. She found him standing in his now empty studio space, looking at the blank walls where his canvases used to hang. "They're destroying everything," she sobbed, her voice breaking. "Everything you've built." He turned to her and gently wiped a tear from her cheek. "They can destroy my walls, Isabella," he whispered, his voice full of a strength that defied his circumstances. "But they can't destroy what I feel for you. They can't touch that." They held each other for hours, two souls clinging together against a world that was determined to tear them apart. They knew, in that moment, that the world outside would never understand their love. The next morning, Liam was gone. There was no note, no text message, no final goodbye. Just an aching, deafening silence. His apartment was empty. He had vanished. Her father, with a grim sense of satisfaction, simply said he had taken care of it. For weeks, Isabella searched every corner of the city. She revisited every place they had been together, every street corner he had ever painted. Nothing. He was gone. Months turned into years. Life, as it does, moved on. Isabella tried to bury her heartbreak in work. She took the reins of her father's empire, becoming the sharp, successful CEO he always wanted her to be. She wore the designer suits. She chaired the board meetings. She lived in the penthouse. But her heart still belonged to a man who had painted her soul in color. A piece of her was forever standing on a rainy street in Brooklyn. Then one evening, years later, she was attending the opening of a chic new art gallery in Soho. She walked through the crowded rooms, nodding politely, the familiar ache of emptiness in her chest. And then, she saw it. She stopped dead in her tracks. There, on a massive canvas in the center of the main room, was a painting that stole the air from her lungs. It was a portrait of her, standing in the rain, that day by the bridge, lost, vulnerable, but with a flicker of life in her eyes she hadn't seen in herself for years. It was her, exactly as he had seen her. Her eyes dropped to the bottom corner of the canvas. Below the stunning image was a small, familiar signature, L.R. Liam Reed. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She felt a presence behind her and slowly, she turned around. And there he was. He was older, his features more defined, a quiet confidence about him now, but his eyes, they still held that same fire, that same depth that had captivated her all those years ago. He smiled softly, a smile that bridged the years of silence. "Took me a while," he said, his voice calm and steady. "Took me a while to build a world where I could belong to yours." Tears streamed down her face as she stepped closer, closing the distance that time and circumstance had forced between them. "And I," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion, "I never stopped waiting." In that crowded gallery, surrounded by strangers, they were the only two people in the world. They didn't need any more words. The city that had once conspired to divide them now stood as a silent witness to their reunion, a testament to two hearts that had found their way back to each other, against all odds. Because sometimes, love isn't about where you come from. It's about where you're willing to go, and how long you're willing to wait, for the one person who truly understands your soul. Thank you so much for watching. If this story touched your heart, please give this video a like and consider subscribing for more stories like this. We'll see you in the next one.